With the massive success of Saints Row 2, Volition finally had everyone's attention, and fans of the first two games in the series were waiting to see what they'd do next with a third title. Expectation and pressure began to weigh on the shoulders of the Illinois-based studio. Now that the world's eyes were on them, Volition needed to keep up the momentum. Saints Row III began development in 2008 under the working title of Saints Row 3. With staff feeling sapped of creativity, they found themselves throwing ideas at a wall and seeing what stuck. For the first 6 months of development, Volition tested a concept for Saints Row 3 where the game was going to be choice-based, possibly something like a Telltale game. For obvious reasons, that idea was dropped. I also find it funny that they were trying to rehash a plot about an undercover agent in the Saints when they clearly needed to finish up Troy's story arc, but I digress. Anyways, the idea was scrapped 6 months into development, and the studio needed to come up with something fast. In an effort to get their creativity flowing, the team did the same thing they did when coming up with ideas for Saints Row 1. They put together their own music video. The music video contained clips from movies like Bad Boys 2, which is a classic by the way, and other action films. The song they used was Kickstart My Heart by Motley Crue. The purpose of the music video was to help the team find a personality for Saints Row 3. With Saints Row 1 having a grounded and down-to-earth tone in the backdrop of the inner city, and Saints Row 2 going for more of an action movie-esque feel, the goal of Saints Row III was to make it look, play, and feel over the top in order to give it an identity in the now crowded field of sandbox games. In a 2011 interview with gaming website Sponge, Greg Donovan, senior producer for Saints Row 2 and 3, was asked about the reason for such a radical shift in tone in Saints Row III, and he answers as follows, quote, "With Saints Row III, we're doing a complete reboot of the franchise, with new technology and everything else. Everything's gonna be over the top this time around. It works for us, it differentiates us from other open world games, we do it well, and players love it." End quote. Donovan wasn't lying about that, because Saints Row 3 is over the top. Saints Row 2 pushed the envelope a bit when it came to the wild things you'd see and do in that game, but at the least it was still grounded and still knew when to pump the brakes. Saints Row 3, on the other hand, shreds the envelope completely. Going from gang wars in the mean streets of the inner city to an entire conflict with a paramilitary unit that uses futuristic weapons is quite the tonal whiplash. Saints Row III is the most polarizing game in the franchise amongst fans, and rightfully so. Many love it, and many hate it. Those who love the game praise it for all the crazy things you could do in and out of combat, its insane story, setting, and characters, the customization, and the off-the-wall humor. Those who hate the game don't like it because of the sudden shift in tone, the story not tying up any loose ends, gameplay feeling inferior to the second game, and the scaled-back customization options. Me personally, I'm a bit mixed when it comes to Saints Row III. I love stuff like the gunplay, the crazy outfits you get to wear, the new activities, stuff like that. But the game's story and even its setting leaves a lot to be desired. Even though this was the first game in the franchise I got to seriously sit down and play, I still find myself preferring Saints Row 1 and 2 over this game. With Stillwater having been the setting of Saints Row twice by now, it was definitely time for something new. Saints Row III takes place in the city of Steelport, which is based off of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. This is made clear with the numerous steel factories and chemical plants littered throughout the metropolis, and some even being found in residential areas. Steelport was also modeled after cities in the Rust Belt region of America, a region where the steel industry once flourished, but is now home to abandoned factories, population loss, and urban decay. Think of places like Gary, Indiana, for example. One other thing the designers borrowed from the city of Pittsburgh were the segmented islands being connected by the various bridges. Despite all this, Steelport itself feels more bland than Stillwater, but I'm gonna save that for when it's time to talk about the open world. With the Saints being new in town, the gangs of Steelport aren't gonna welcome them with open arms. In this game, the gangs are more over the top and less like the ones from previous titles. What's also different about these crews is that they're all working together under one conglomerate. This conglomerate is called the Syndicate. So instead of different crews across the city fighting each other for control, it's now them versus you. The first gang is known as the Morning Star, and they're run by Syndicate leader Philippe Lauren. These guys' main source of income is prostitution and human trafficking. They're usually seen wearing black suits, although the women in this gang wear lingerie alongside a duster coat. Without spoiling too much, this gang and Philippe himself are huge missed opportunities. That's all I'll say about them for now. Next are the Deckers. This crew is run by 16-year-old Matt Miller, making making him the youngest antagonist in the series. The Deckers specialize in cybercrimes, stuff like emptying bank accounts, unleashing viruses, pretty much any tech-related crime you can think of. Out of all rival crews, their designs are my favorites. These guys are going for the cybergoth aesthetic, with their clothing emitting a bright blue neon, and crew members sporting painted nails, heavy makeup, and dyed hair. Their vehicles have some of the best designs in the game too. I think it's safe to say that the Deckers have the best drip here in Saints Row 3. And finally, the last rival crew is the Luchadors, run by Mexican wrestler Eddie Kilbane Pryor. From what I've gathered, the Luchadors specialize in dealing steroids and I guess gambling? All of these guys are decked out in wrestling and tactical gear, and they love to drive around these huge trucks. These guys are pretty much the Brotherhood if they had the backing of a huge criminal empire, and no, that thing with Ultor does not count. The cast for this game is star-studded. You've got returning cast members such as Ken Michael, the voice for Male Voice 2 in the last game, Daniel Dai Kim, whom reprises his role as Johnny Gat, and RFS Kinchin coming back to play as Pierce. And then you've got the heavy hitters. Hulk Hogan, yes, the Hulk Hogan, voices wrestler Angel de la Muerte. Yuri Lowenthal of Naruto and Persona fame voices Matt Miller, adult film star Sasha Grey voices Viola de Winter, Megan Hollingshead, who voiced Rangiku from Bleach, plays as Kiki de Winter, Troy Baker voices Male Voice 1, Laura Bailey plays as Female Voice 2, and Natalie Lander from Fire Emblem Fates voices Kinsey Kensington. I know that I missed a lot, but there are just so many to go over. On November 15, 2011, Saints Row III was released in the United States and Australia. Europe would get the game just 3 days later on the 18th of November. Saints Row III sold incredibly well, selling more than 5 million copies in total, and it received universal praise from critics and audiences alike. For a lot of people, this was their first Saints Row game, including me, as I got the game that year, and then I played the series backwards. I vividly remember my brother and I taking turns playing this game on my dad's old Launch Day 360, which, by the way, I'm honestly surprised it didn't give us a red ring for all the years we had it. Rest in peace to that thing. It died in late 2012 after the disc reader stopped working. In May of 2019, 8 years after the launch of Saints Row 3, it would get a port on the Nintendo Switch. The Switch port was handled by German company Fish Labs. This port actually flew under my radar for a while. I didn't even find out that there was a Switch version until I ran into it at a GameStop later that year. PS4, Xbox One, and PC users would have to wait one more year before they could get their hands on a full-blown remaster, which released in May of 2020. It's got a lot of new and touched-up visuals and contains all the DLC. I've got a couple gripes with this version. One, they took the easy route by adding a bunch of reflection and lens flare, I guess trying to make it look quote-unquote modern. And another thing is that they added a bunch of new models, and some look good, some look bad, others just look questionable. I don't know, man. My biggest gripe with this version, however, is the fact that you still can't replay cutscenes and missions. For this video, I'm going to be playing the remastered version on PlayStation 4. One more thing, the remasters have some really odd glitches that to this day have yet to be patched, so if my character is acting weird when getting into cars, that's the game glitching out, not me doing that. There's also this really weird glitch where one of the analog sticks will start drifting out of nowhere. I actually panicked too because this purple controller is my favorite, and you know how they stay overcharging for new controllers. The reason for the drift is because of an odd glitch with the controller dead zoned, and of course, as of me recording, there's been no patch for this. Thanks for the free heart attack, Spirisoft. With the Saints finding themselves in Steelport, they've got to find a way to survive in a city that wants them dead. It's time to lock, load, and show these other crews that we mean business.